Hey guys, what's up? So it's been a while, not a long while, but a little while since I've uploaded on here last. I believe my last upload was Floating Dragon by Peter Straub, if I remember correctly. But I wanted to do a final video for 2020 on this channel. Now, everyone has said it, and I mean, it'd be putting it lightly to say that 2020 has been a crazy year, absolutely, for everyone. Ignore that's just the cat. But anyways, 2020 has been a crazy year, and I mean, anything you can say about it probably has been said. But I wanted to close out this year with a top 10 seven books that I read in the year of 2020. Now these are just books that stood out to me. They're books that either I just really liked, or I thought stood out for one reason or another. I'm not saying these books are like the best in terms of literary merit or whatever. That's not what this channel is about. This channel is about reviewing books and reviewing them based on how much I enjoy them, or I enjoyed them at the end of the day. I will give books credit for like certain, aspects of it, such as take an author, taking a different approach to storytelling or the writing style and stuff like that. There are things that about books that I don't like that I can appreciate at least. Like Floating Dragon, for example. I wasn't high on the book, but I appreciated certain aspects of it. And, it'll kind of be the case with one specific book in this list. Now, I used top 7 because it came down to there were just 7 books that really stood out to me this year. So, without further ado, let's get into this. And again, they aren't necessarily in any particular order, like in terms of like how much like least liked and then most liked or whatever. I mean, some of them sort of are, but not really. It's just a list that I put together, and like I said, they're just books that stood out to me this year. So, all right, number 7. We have Stone of Tears by Terry Goodkind. Now, one thing that I don't believe I mentioned is that some books in this list are going to be part of a series. I read a lot of series and I read a lot of standalone books, so that becomes a thing. But yeah, Stone of Tears by Terry Goodkind. Now, some of you probably know this as being the second book in the Sword of Truth series. Now, the Sword of Truth series and Terry Goodkind himself are both very polarizing. The Sword of Truth series, a very polarizing fantasy series in the fantasy community, and Terry Goodkind being a very polarizing figure himself. I remember earlier this year when I finally decided that I wanted to try out this series after kind of being scared off by, some scathing reviews on YouTube and other things that I had heard. I decided to try it out, and actually when I went to buy the first 3 books at the half price books I went to, literally, the cashier almost started interrogating me about it. He was like, "Oh, are you aware that Terry Goodkind has said this in the past and that in the past?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, I'm aware, dude. I know. I just, it's just like he was almost putting me on blast or something. It was really weird. It was kind of awkward." But, anyways, Stone of Tears is the second book, and the first book was pretty good. It was a good introduction to the series. But this one really it stood out to me. It took the series to just a whole nother level because you get to know so much more about the characters, and this book just had everything I could want. It had, action, a lot of action, drama, character development, a lot of, lore, as like what you would expect with any fantasy series. A lot of, some political intrigue too, which was nice. And like I said, the character development, you get to know a lot more about a lot of the characters in this series, and it's just nice. There's some new characters introduced that are really cool. It was epic. It was just that's the word I can describe it as, is epic. And some fans of the Sword of Truth series, who dropped off of the series, even say that this was the high point of the series. Now, that's just an opinion. I'm currently reading the 3rd book, and I'm enjoying it so far. So, it's just an opinion. I'm going to continue with the series. I'm not going to stop at the second book just because that's what some people say. But I really enjoyed this one in the series. Just fantastic all around. There are some nitpicks I have about the series, but, overall, I enjoy the series. I'm glad I gave it a shot. And, to any connoisseurs or snobs of fantasy who will see this and say that I had this in my list, this series in my list, or even a book from the series in my list and start angrily commenting about, whatever. I know the controversies. I know everything. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. It's just my opinion, dude. So. Anyways, Stone of Tears, number 7. All right, number 6. Now, technically, this is two. This is a part of another series, and this is 2 books. But that's because I couldn't really narrow it down, and it came between these 2. So I decided to put these two books in the number 6 spot. And because they're part of the same series, I figured it'd be fine. But that is Grave Peril and Death Masks by Jim Butcher, which is part of the Dresden Files series. Dresden Files I started last year, around this time, like a little earlier, but around this time. And I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm digging it. I love Harry Dresden as a main character. Absolutely love Harry Dresden, and a lot of the other characters, Karen Murphy, Michael, who was like a Knight of the Cross, who was introduced in book 3. He's really cool. There's a lot of good characters in the series, and I'm sure that because this isn't like traditional fantasy. This is like pulp fiction, like noir, mystery mixed in with like urban fantasy, basically. So it kind of has like a unique twist on it. And some people who are, again, more traditional, like, crime thriller fans or more, traditional fantasy fans may not care for it. But I think it's really cool how it kind of blends those genres together. It's almost like taking Law of Order and mixing it in with, like, I don't know, whatever urban fantasy series you can think of. It's really cool. The third book, I've read the first 5 books so far, and I am going to continue with it soon. It's just there's a lot to read, and there's a lot so much to read, so little time. But I am going to get back on the Dresden series very, very soon. But there's always multiple plot lines going on in every book. This one deals with like demons, like dream demons, and it was really, really disturbing at times, really creepy, but just really a lot of fun. Something happens at the end that's like really, really sad and devastating, and it was just like, wow, and it dealt with like the vampire courts and whatnot, which carries over into book 5 here, Death Masks. But Harry has gotten himself into trouble with the vampire courts, and he's always getting himself into trouble, and but just fun books, just fun books. It's not, they're not. And again, they're not any great works of literature or anything, but again, that's not what this channel is about. It's not about being a literary snob. It's just about books that I enjoy. And the Dresden Files series is so much fun. It's so much fun. They're easy reads. They're fast-paced reads, but yet the characters are very, very complex, and I enjoy that. And then Death Masks deals with the vampire courts again, but it also deals with another group, and with the leader of it, Nicodemus. And again, there's a lot going on in the 5th book. But again, just fun time, fun read, just great. In the beginning, Harry Dresden is actually on a talk show, and he's talking about how he's a wizard, and like most people don't believe him. They think that he's just like some sort of crackpot. So that was kind of entertaining in the beginning of this one. But yeah, I love this series. And the thing about it is that Harry Dresden is not like a perfect character. He is very, very flawed. But he's still just a likable character, and he says a lot of funny shit too. And I was just like, he's a great character, great series, and I can't wait to continue with it. So that'd be number 6. Number 5 would be Afraid by Jack Kilborn. Now, this was just a fun, fast-paced, terrifying thriller. It's about this town gets invaded by this scientific. There's like this deep government scientific experiment thing, and these guys who are basically test subjects of that infiltrate this town, and each of them are different. That's the thing. Jack Kilborn basically lists his inspirations as being like Stephen King and Dean Koontz, and another author who I don't remember off the top of my head, but the thing that I liked about this book was that it had elements of Koontz and King. Koontz with like the scientific, deep state, deep government, whatever you want to call it, stuff, and it's very tightly paced. But also it reminded me of Stephen King with the characters, because even the bad guys are really unique and developed, most of them anyways. The not the antagonist, the protagonist, Josh and Franny, um, and there was another one. There was a deputy, but they're all very, very developed, very nuanced characters. I cared about them by the end of this book. I didn't want anything to happen to them, and then some of them die, which is really sad. And it was just really, really good. And I'm definitely going to continue with Jack Kilborn's works. He has a bunch of works out there. I would highly recommend you check out his stuff if you like thrillers or horror and stuff like that. But definitely check out Afraid by Jack Kilborn. I mean, like I said, it's tightly paced, it's fun, it's, it's not, there's nothing there. I don't think there was a slow moment in this book at all. And the thing is, with tightly paced thrillers, the characters usually aren't that developed. But the characters in this were still very, in my opinion, they were very nuanced and had depth to them, and I really enjoyed that. And there's a kid in here, the Franny's son, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but, I liked the fact that he was a kid and it was believable, because, like mentioned Dean Koontz, because this is one of his inspirations, but one of my criticisms of Koontz is that the characters that he writes aren't that believable. Like, he's not great at writing kids, and some other authors out there really are not great at writing kids either, but Jack Kilborn definitely, I think, does a good job writing, like, child characters and whatnot. So, there's also a monkey in this. It's kind of funny, but, anyways, Afraid by Jack Kilborn. Highly recommend. Check it out. It's really, really good. Alright, number 4, we have Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. Now, thing about me is that I am a slow reader. I used to be a fast reader back in the day, like 5-6 years ago. I am not a fast reader. I'm a slow reader nowadays. It'll take me forever to finish a book that should maybe only take you a few days to read, whereas it'll take me like a week or a few weeks to read. So I'm a slow reader. However, I read this book while I was on vacation from work, and I read this in like a few days, I think. I think I read this in like 2-3 days. It was really, really good. The pacing was very smooth. The characters were great. It reminded me of, it kind of reminded me of Joe Hill, kind of. Like, if you've ever read Joe Hill, who is, I'm sure it's no secret, he's the son of Stephen King, but Joe Hill's books have a very, very similar pacing and feel as this one did. Again, I just mentioned like how Jack Kilborn of Afraid did a good job at writing a child character. There's a child character in this one too, and again, Paul Tremblay does a great job, writing a believable like child character. But this basically deals with a haunting. It's a haunted house, but it's not it's not like a traditionally based haunting, because the thing is, you don't know, because the main character's older sister is possessed, but you don't know if by the end of the book, you don't know if she's actually possessed or if she was actually just struggling with like some sort of mental disorder or mental illness or something, or maybe it was a combination of both. And you really just see like the collapse of this family, and it's just really, really horrifying. Like some of the hauntings are horrifying, but then it also deals with like the media and media influence and stuff like that. And I thought the real horrifying thing was just how much it affected this family and how this family completely broke down and how dysfunctional they became. And it was insane. Very disturbing. There was one thing I didn't like about this book, though, and that is it's basically separated into 3 parts. There's the main character who recalls the events that she went through as a kid. There's a part where she's an adult and she's being interviewed by this one person who she's basically giving her story to. And then there's a blog that she writes. I did not care for the blog part, solely because the blog part was very, very, very preachy, like politically preachy and whatnot. And look, I don't want to get into politics or anything. If you've read this book, I don't want to get into it, but I found that the blog was, again, very preachy. I'd say condescending a little bit. And I just didn't agree with a lot of the things that were kind of said and implied and whatnot. I mean, if you want to know, you can check it out for yourself. So I really didn't like that part. It kept it from being because if it weren't for that part, this would have been a 5-star read for me. But that kind of knocked it down a star. Would have been more like a 4 out of 5 just because of that part of the book. Other than that, though, this is a really good book. Great characters, very terrifying, and not for the reasons that you think. Very, very smoothly paced, moves along really, really well. Did not want to put this down. Finished it in a few days, and I'm a slow reader, so that should tell you something. I've read another one of Paul Tremblay's books, Cabin at the End of the Woods, I believe it's called. That one was good, but it didn't live up to this one, and I believe this was his first published work, and some people say that this is like the only book that he's written that people have actually enjoyed generally, so I don't know, that's just an opinion, but anyways, Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay, number 4. Number 3, I have The Rats by James Herbert. Now, I read this back in, like, April, which was, like, essentially, in my opinion, it was, like, the height of the pandemic craze. Like, people were still, like, going into stores and just doing all the dumb shit, like buying toilet paper and whatnot. And I read this in the midst of all that, and it was very, very appropriate for the times, for the pandemic, because essentially this book deals with a pandemic of killer rats. Of all things, and you would think that might seem silly, but it's actually not. It's actually pretty terrifying, and, you know, the thing is that these rats are really, really, really deadly. Like, if you are bitten by one of these rats, you are fucked. Like, you are absolutely fucked. Like, you're basically, it's a death sentence. And there's one really, really, like, chilling scene in, like, a train station where, like, this one guy is, like, trapped in the train with these 2 other women, and you just see, like, people getting attacked by rats outside of the train, and people just trying to fight, but failing and just getting eaten alive and dying. It was just really, really detailed, and the way it was written was disturbing, and it was just, like, it was crazy. It's not a long book either, and it does move fairly fast. The characters, while not being, like, super, super developed and nuanced or deep or anything like that, they were good enough for a story like this. This is probably a story that you would find on, like, or if it was made, it has been made into a movie, actually, but it's essentially the equivalent of, like, some, like, you know, B-level science fiction movie that you would find on some channel, like whatever that one channel is called, where it plays, like, just nothing but, like, B science fiction movies from, like, the 80s and 90s and whatnot. But still, it's good. Again, it stuck out to me because it was appropriate for the times, so, you know, I would say these rats are much more deadly than, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into political shit, but anyways, The Rats by James Herbert. If you want just a disturbing, scary, fun, apocalyptic read, you know, I'd recommend The Rats. This is a trilogy. I was reading Lair, but which is the sequel to this, and I actually put it down because I just wasn't enjoying it as much, so, but make up your mind about that for yourself if you read this and want to continue with the trilogy, but Rats by James Herbert, number 3. Number 2, this is also kind of appropriate for the times, but that is Fire and Ash by Jonathan Mayberry. This is part of a series. This is a series of 4 books. It's the Rotten and Ruined series by Jonathan Mayberry, and it is a zombie apocalyptic series with a bit of a different philosophy twist on the zombie thing. But this is the final book in the series, and to me, this finale was really, really, really good. My favorite book in the series is, it's the first one, but it's followed very, very, very closely by this one. I also really enjoyed the 3rd book, which was Flesh and Bone in the series. My least favorite was probably Dust and Decay, which was the sequel to the first one, and I haven't read Bits and Pieces, which is like a compilation of short stories. Not technically part of the series, but still kind of part of the series, but this was like the finale of the actual series. But again, I mean, this is more young adult too, so I mean, you know, if you don't like young adult or you're sensitive about young adult, I would still recommend checking this out, because even though this is a young adult series, it does get very, very serious, very, very dark. There's a lot of themes explored in this series, and I appreciated that. There is sort of somewhat of a political undertone in it, a little bit. Didn't always agree with it, but I do appreciate the different perspective and philosophy in this, I guess you could say. The characters are amazing. There's so much character growth and development throughout this series, especially the main character. A lot of beloved characters. One character that ends up getting killed, I won't say who, but gets killed in the second book, and it's just devastating. But all these characters grow and develop over time, and it's awesome. It's just amazing. And there's also a character in this one that comes into play from another one of Jonathan Mayberry's series. It's set technically in the same world. He's kind of set up like a parallel, well, not a parallel universe. Well, not a parallel universe. That's not the correct term, I don't think. But he's set up a whatever you'd call it, a universe with characters within the same universe from different series, which is really cool. If they made this into a TV series or a movie series, it would be great. I wish they would. Maybe they will soon. It wouldn't surprise me if they do eventually one of these days. It would certainly be appropriate for the time. But the zombie genre has kind of been really tired out, so they might want to hold off on doing this for a little while. But again, Fire and Ash by Jonathan Mayberry. Great finale to a really, really good series. I would say check it out. Even if you don't like young adult, still check out the Rotten Ruins series. Great series. You know, everything you could want. You know, again, great characters who actually develop over time and, you know, actually come off as real human beings. And just, you know, everything. And just you go through sadness, and there's funny moments in the series, and just everything. It's a great series. I was sad when it was over because I want to continue with these characters. And there is actually a sequel series to this, so, you know, might check that out pretty soon. And number 1 on this list. This is a classic, so I'm sure some, you know, more literary connoisseurs out there will, you know, might be satisfied with this video because of that. And that is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Now, this is a classic. I mean, this doesn't really need an introduction. It's a classic among, you know, people who are fans of horror and just in general. There have been several adaptations. There was a movie made out of this way, way, way back when. This book was published in 1959, and I believe a movie was made like in the early 60s. There was a remake of the movie, and it wasn't very good. Now there's a TV series of this, as you can see, on Netflix. I haven't watched it. I haven't really checked out any of the adaptations. I might go and check out the old one, since I would assume that's probably the most faithful to the book. I've heard that the TV series kind of does its own thing. That's what I've heard anyways. I don't know if that's true or not. The remake I heard was absolute trash, so I won't check that one out. But, you know, it's funny because I wouldn't even say this was necessarily like one of my like favorite books in terms of like readability. I mean, I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. I didn't dislike it, but like, you know, it's definitely something that it's a book that you have to read and think about. It's not just a book that you can just open and kind of. It's not like brain candy. Like it's actually a book that you have to read and think about. And it's the thing that I appreciate about this story the most is the atmosphere. Like, usually I'm the type of reader who's in it for the characters, and the characters in this, you know, they're fine. You know, they're okay. They're fine for what it is. But it's the atmosphere for me more than anything that's set up in this book that really gets me. It's like there's this creepy atmosphere in this house. There's some things that happen, and by the end of the book, you don't know if the main character is actually being, like, possessed, or if she's just going insane. Like, you don't really know one way or the other. And again, it's just one of those things that you kind of have to think about. It's kind of like A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. Like, it's just, it's something that, you know, something you have to think about. It's interesting to think about. And the opening line for this book I really liked as well. See if I can find it here and just read it to you. Let's see. I think it's right. Yeah, Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so far 80 years, and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there, walked alone. It really just sets up the tone and the atmosphere for this book surrounding the house and whatnot. And I did kind of comment on the characters. The main character, you know, is kind of sympathetic. You do kind of feel for her. She's not having the best of time with her home life and whatnot. And she kind of just goes to this house on, like, kind of a whim, essentially, because why not? But she does, you know, become friends with other people who are at the house, who go to the house. And each of the characters is unique, but you don't really learn a ton about them, but you do know enough to make them stand out. So, anyways, I appreciate this book for what it is. It may not have been, like, one of my favorites, but, like, I do like it and appreciate it for the impact that it's had on the horror genre, for the influence it's had. And again, for just setting up a really, really creepy atmosphere. Some horror books and movies don't really do that well. It's more just about the gore or the jump scares, and, you know, in cases of movies and whatnot. But this one just does a good job of setting up a creepy atmosphere, and I really appreciate that. So that was my top 7 books of the year for 2020. I might try to do this, like, annually. But, you know, let's hope for a better year next year in 2021. You know, I'm hoping for a better year. You know, knock on wood. I don't want to jinx anything and have 2021 be an even worse year. Some people are saying it will be, but I hope not. You know, I'm trying to be optimistic about it, but figured this would be fitting. So, anyways, that's it for this one. Let me know what you guys think about these books and what you think of my lists. Maybe there's books out there that you want me to read and review. Let me know that too. And I'll be back to you guys soon, hopefully with more in the new year. So, peace, have a good day, keep on reading.